The Literary City with Ramjee Chandran, exclusively on IndigoMusic.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Literary City podcast. I'm your host, Ramjee Chandran, and my guest today was convicted of a crime, the crime of good and honest literature. He is Egyptian writer Ahmed Naji, author of Rotten Evidence. Ahmed was imprisoned in Egypt for his writing, but he discovered a whole world of literature inside Cairo prison. He is clever and he is funny, and you'll see just how clever and funny in my conversation with him. Today, I'm excited to be speaking with Ahmed Naji, a writer who spent 2 years in a prison in Egypt for writing what the authorities judged to be objectionable material. But while Ahmed Naji was in prison, he discovered literature. It's an amazing story of a person who finds magic and hope in the unlikely environs of the library of a stereotypical prison, a pestilential and dank hovel, one biscuit short of hell. But before I talk to him, I thought it might be useful to get some context going here, so maybe a little primer about Egyptian literature first. Modern Egyptian literature began to flourish in the early 20th century, say right up to the end of the 1940s, as writers started to break away from traditional Arabic literary forms, such as classical Arab poetry with specific meter and rhyming schemes. The popular ghazals are one such example. It was during that time that the author Taha Hussein, often called the Dean of Arabic literature, challenged classical literary norms when he introduced a more accessible style of prose. The next decades saw the birth of a cultural renaissance with the overthrow of King Farouk and the monarchy in 1952 and the beginning of the Republic. This gave rise to a lot of the expression of the day, and that's about when Naguib Mahfouz happened. He went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1988, and he brought world attention to Egyptian literature. Now, as with all cultural forms, one decade tends to build on the previous, and the successive decades have seen social realism, pioneering books like Woman at Point Zero about the struggles of women in Egyptian society, and writers explain the challenges of contemporary life in Egypt. There was the growth of female and feminist voices, and of course the influences from the Arab Spring. Importantly, there has been the growth in contribution to literature from the Egyptian diaspora. Speaking of which, check out the episode with Omar El Akkad, a truly talented Egyptian-American author. I found his writing in a literary magazine and invited him on the podcast. I found Ahmed Naji's writing online too, and I was fascinated by his story and his work, and we tracked him down to his home in the United States. Ahmed's latest book, Rotten Evidence, is the story of his time in prison, about how he discovered literature, the writer in himself, and, importantly, the reality of protest. I found these lines he wrote captured the essence of that sense of protest against censorship and being jailed for alleged obscenity. Here's the quote. James Joyce, who swore to express himself with the greatest degree of freedom possible and never to serve home, fatherland, or church, said a writer had 3 weapons: silence, exile, and cunning. Well, Joyce, they put me in prison and all I had left was laughter and rage. I like quotable lines from books, and in this case I was tripping over them in the first few pages. Such is the captivating prose of my guest today. And now here he is, joining me from his home in Las Vegas. Ahlan Bik, Ahmed Naji. Welcome to the Literary City.
Ahlan Bik. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is entirely mine. And let me plunge right in. Now, you were sentenced to a term in prison because you were found guilty of gross violation of public decency. Did you grossly violate public decency?
Officially, yes. I have an official government paper that says so. So I'm officially ex-criminal and all this accused. But yeah, the story started in 2014. I wrote my second novel, Using Live. And after it was published, a chapter of it was published at Akhbar al-Adab, which is a weekly literature magazine. And as you just mentioned, someone reads this chapter and went to the police station and accused me of disturbing public morality and hurting his feeling, and said that when he read this part, he got like a blood pressure and a heart attack and so on.
Oh, how clinical.
What happened after a year of a trial? A court find me guilty, another one find me not guilty. It ended up with this called find me guilty and sentence me for 2 years. And then I was out of the prison in 2017. Situation in Egypt was getting more and more dangerous and tight. Also, as an ex-prisoner, I was under surveillance and censorship, so it was kind of impossible to continue working and writing there. But also, I was banned from traveling. I was banned from leaving the country. So it took me a year and a half to be able to leave and leave the country finally in 2018.
So the ordeal was more than just the 2 years in prison.
Yeah, it's a long struggle that continue until now. Like it's been 5 years. I haven't been to Egypt. It's not ever safe for me to go there.
Why? Because you might be arrested again, or
Yeah, of sure. You might be arrested again. They can also let you enter the country, but not leaving the country again.
right?
There has been like many Egyptian writers now living in exile. Not only me,
Right.
writers and
Sure.
and so on. So yeah, it's been 5 years. Like even my mother passed away, and I couldn't be there with her or visiting her. So yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. It's a continuing struggle, not for me, but I would say for millions of Egyptians under this regime.
And more power to your elbow. Now, to quote you, I found these lines that you wrote: rebel against the contradictions of religion, fantasy, and human morality. Do you?
Not that much. Like religion wasn't in my focus that much. But I think this is changing now after moving here to United States. Also, I found it here, like I'm discovering, as you said, I'm discovering like the metaphysic of the religion here, and it's so inspiring and inspire me.
How?
Like one of the I just like start writing in English lately. So I'm moving from Arabic to writing in English. And one of the first short stories that I found myself writing in English was basically about Las Vegas, but also it's mixing Islamic metaphysic fantasy to Las Vegas urban scene. Like
Was that the essay about the mosques?
Yeah, it was this short stories about.
I've read it. I've read it, yeah.
Yeah, it was this short story about the mosque and Isra and Mi'raj and all this stuff. Because also as I was telling you, I wasn't that much into religion, but I come here, and you start to discover. Like for example, I will go to an events here. And after the event, a woman will come and shake hands with me and will introduce herself as she's part of this association or organization for Arab Muslim writers. And the thing is, for me, from where I come from, I'm secular. There is other Islamic literature and other Islamic group, but I have no connection with that. But finally, you arrive here and you discover, at the end of the day, your name is Ahmed. So it doesn't matter. You will be seen as Muslim and part of that. So I become curious, and this curiosity led me to a lot of discoveries and also a lot of fun, and created the fun stories like that one, godshow.com.
I enjoyed that story.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to how you discovered literature in prison. But first, I'd like to go to the day that you were being brought to prison and you were distracted by the art on the walls, the murals. And you wrote this very compelling sentence: I tend to experience art viscerally. I feel it involuntarily in my digestive system all the way down to my urinary tract, and the result can be pain, pleasure, or a cramp, agony, or delight.
Yeah, I was shocked that when I entered the prison, usually when you have an imaginary picture of the immersion, which is like a gray walls,
Yes.
a dark areas, and so on. But when I entered this prison, I found that all the prison wall from outside and inside is covered by this horrible, horrible kitsch painting. Like you are in the prison, and in your face on the wall there is a gigantic a painting of Hawaiian island.
That's funny.
It's things like when I start asking around. So when I start asking around, I discovered like 10 years ago there was this famous Egyptian artist who like got involved in this corrupted case and was sentenced for 5 years. And while his time, he teached other prisoners who are painter, like a wall and house painter,
Cool.
and they started to decorate the whole prison. And the warden and the police officer saw that this is something nice, because now when journalists or something come to check out in the prison, it
Oh,
appeared to
yeah.
be
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this set the stage for your narrative for the next bit. Now, let's skipping past how bad prison was. I mean, no one will assume that prison is anything but dangerous and stinking, but you discovered literature there, specifically literary cellmates. One guy was reading Mrs. Anwar Sadat's Woman of Egypt. Another was reading Taha Hussein's with Abu al-Ala al-Mari in his prison.
When I entered the prison, and I was in cell with more than 60 people, so it's more than 60 people living in the same space. And because there is nothing else you can do, all of them are reading.
I get it.
So you are surrounded by those people who never open, some of them never opened the book before entering the prison, but now they are reading and they are discovering the enjoyment of reading and lectures. And personally, since I was 19 years old, I was graduated from mass communication journalism. So I have been working on journalism since I was 19 or 20 years. And I have been working on this weekly lecture magazine. So I always, all my life, was surrounded by writers and artists and critics. So I discovered when I was in prison that I discovered another world of literature. Like it was my first time to communicate with regular or normal readers. Like, readers who are not writers, who are not artists, just reading to pass time. And their impression and comments on what they read was so inspiring for me, and eyes opened. Like I remember very well, like one of them in my first couple of weeks, and one of them we were talking, and they were like, "Oh, so you are a writer? Your family is going to bring more nice books and so on." I told them, "Yes. What kind of book would you like to read?"
And what did they want to read?
Two of them actually were very anxious about Dostoevsky.
Really?
They were like, "Oh, could you bring us more Dostoevsky?" And I was shocked. I was like, "Who want to read Dostoevsky while he in the prison?" And I was like, "Did you read Dostoevsky?" They were like, "Yeah, he's so fun. He's so funny. He's hilarious funny." And my first impression was like, "Dostoevsky funny? How?" And I asked them, and one of them was like, "Yes, in all of his novel and stories, there is a clown characters.
That's true.
Most of his novel plot is built on contradiction and misunderstanding."
Nice.
And I was like, "Yes, he's right." And for this reader, yeah, Dostoevsky was funny. It's hilarious. But and this was my first time to hear someone call Dostoevsky writing fun. Because usually, as an intellectual, when we talk about Dostoevsky, we talk about, oh, Dostoevsky, a novel in 19th century, and the complexity of human character, and so on. So it was like discovering a new phase of literature. And this was happening. In the meantime, also, I was questioning myself. I was writing, and I already been writing and publishing since I was 23 years old. But also, I wasn't consider myself as a writer. I mean, I was a journalist. I was a film
Sure.
documentary maker, other things. But suddenly you are in prison because of your writing, and you start to question yourself: does it worth it? Some people will come and ask me this question: if you know before writing the novel that it will lead you to prison, will you write it? And I was
Hmm.
thinking on that until the accident with the rhinoceros happened. You know, in the book, I don't use names because I used to live
Hmm.
with these people. I respect them and their privacy, so I don't use names or any details that expose them. But there was
Hmm.
this guy with us, and the nickname is Rhinoceros, and he's so corrupted. Like, the government
Hmm.
accused him of stealing $400 million. He's saying no, they are just 200 millions. When he first did all the scheme, like he made all the company paper and all the official paper under his father name, who's like a very old guy, 81 years old. So when the government was looking for him, they first arrested his father and then they arrested him. So both the son and the father was together in the same cell.
Wow.
And this guy, like I watched him one time, his father got a heart attack and faint, and he was standing like finishing his cigarettes, and everyone was rushing to help his father, and he was just like smoking his cigarette. And one day I
Good
woke
grief.
up at night and went to the bathroom, and I found this guy, Serenosaurus, this monster, corrupted monster, crying with tears. I was shocked. I was like, "Are you okay? Is something happened with your case? Did you receive bad news?" And he was like, "No, no, no, no. It's not that. It's not that." I was like, "So what's wrong?" And then he asked me, "Have you ever read this novel called In My Heart, a Hebrew Girl?" And
What?
this is a very romantic novels, not even romantic. There is a new trend in Arabic literature called Sufism, Sufism romanticism. So it's
Hmm.
mix romance with Sufism, with religion, and it's usually for teenagers. And I was like, no, I didn't read this novel. And he was like, oh my God, you have to read it. It squeezed my heart. It broke my heart. It's just like I left it on my bed because when I looked to the cover, I remember sentence and paragraph from it, so I started crying. And I was shocked, like this guy has a dead heart. But suddenly a novel, a writing, is having this huge effect and impact on him. And I was shocked. I was like, what is that? What is this hidden power inside literature and writing that could reach out and affect such creature that we even could question if he's a human being or not?
This is hilarious. But moving on, I'd like to talk about Arabic literature, specifically two icons of
Yeah.
Egyptian literature that I wanted to ask you about: Taha Hussein and the person that he imagined his time in prison with, Al-Mari. By the way, I was looking for the book that you referenced, which is Taha Hussein writing about his time in prison with Al-Mari. I looked
Yes.
everywhere, but I haven't been able to find it on it.
Yeah. I don't think there will be an English translation for it. This is like also a very old
Oh,
one that it was written and published in
right.
30s. But Al Ma'ari, I'm sure there is different English translation of Al Ma'ari poetry.
That I have found. I
Yeah,
mean, I found some of those, but I
yeah.
haven't found Taha, the one that you mentioned, Taha Hussein's book,
No,
In Prison with Al-Mari. I'm
yes.
not able to find it.
Uh,
I read that Taha Hussein was a pioneer, and he sort of redefined Arabic literature in his time. Is that the case?
yes, of course. Tahsin played a fundamental part in Arabic culture.
And his influence seems to be lasting. Whenever
Yeah.
I read Egyptian writers, now I'm not talking about giants like Said and Mahfouz,
Hmm.
I'm talking about writers who get published in literary magazines of late, I get a strong sense of the literary, of classical literature, which is why Your description of finding literary treasures with your cellmates seemed completely credible to me. It seemed like, yes, I understand. That's what you'll expect if you go into an Egyptian prison, people reading literature. Now, so does the average Egyptian have a strong sense of literature?
Uh, there is appreciation. This is changing in the last decade after Dubai rising. But in 60s and 80s and 90s, most of publishing was happening from the government. You know, like Egypt, starting from 60s, invested heavily in culture institute and in publishing institute. What happens that this situation will give the writer the freedom because you don't have an obligation towards the market. So it gives you also a freedom to focus on the literary and artistic values.
Yes, the business of art having to have patrons and not customers.
Yeah, you're right. You are right. You nail it. You nail it right. Yeah.
And here I was romanticizing that every high school kid in Egypt learned literature.
I was that they teach them actually the worst literature.
Oh no.
Like yeah, like literally
Oh
I was
dear.
I was I was writing about an poet who lived in 50s and 60s. And he's very romantic. It's all of his poems about love and very tender. One of his poems they teach it kids in high school. And when I read, like they choose his worst poem, you know, like his worst poem.
That's funny. Now, we cannot discuss Egyptian literature and not mention Naguib Mahfouz. You write that you could hardly see yourself as reading Mahfouz's Cairo trilogy as an adult. Why? Is he preferred reading for the emerging intellect? Or did I get it wrong?
No, what I say is that I was lucky that I read Cairo trilogy, his three novels when I was young. I reread some of his old work because sometimes the officer will not allow me new book. You know, like my family will visit, they will bring me the new book, and the deal will be, oh, I can't let this books enter until the high-ranking security officer have to read and approve it. So sometimes I don't have things to read, and when you don't have things to read, it's a horrible time because you suddenly feel the heaviness of the time passing. You are just sitting there looking to the clock, and once the time pass, so the night come and you will be able to sleep. So, and he will say, oh, go to the prison library, and the prison they will have like small library. And in this library, it was full of old and classic book, and part of it was Naguib Mahfouz. So in most of these cases, when I don't have book, I will go and re-enjoy even reading his work. So yeah, no, I'm in the opposite. I love him.
Oh, that's good to know. So there's another thing that we cannot not discuss in the context of Egyptian literature, and that is the city of Cairo. You know, I've never been to Cairo. I'd love to go.
And you really enjoy it. It's also getting cheap these days.
Really, it's another thing that's good to know. So about Cairo, in your previous book, Using Life, there's this foreword in which you mentioned about Cairo: a miserable, hideous, filthy, rotten, dark, oppressive, besieged, lifeless, enervating, polluted, overcrowded, impoverished, angry, smoke-filled, simmering, humid, trashy, shitty, choleric, anemic mess of a city.
Yeah.
Well, in many great cities of the developing world, we might call that Tuesday.
Tuesday? Yeah, perfect name. Okay.
Yeah. So tell me, Cairo, it seems to inspire something literary, if not poetic. I read this wonderful book. It's a collection of essays called The Literary Life of Cairo, edited by Samia Mehrez.
Yeah, amazing, right? Amazing professor. Yes, I know her.
You know, in that book, I was particularly taken up by this essay written by Edward Said, and it's titled Homage to a Belly Dancer.
I remember the article that you mentioned by Edward Said. He was talking about Haya karaoke.
Right.
If you remember in the article, he's talking about how when he was in high school in Victoria College, he will escape school in the morning to go with his friends to this nightclub So the nightclub can't allow them enter because they are young. They are not 19s. But in the morning, it's time for belly dancer for training and rehearsal. So it's like they are attending the belly dancer show.
Nice to associate Edward Said with that.
Young kid can go into nightclub, but he knows the keys could work in the morning, in the
That's
noon
true.
to see
That's
the
true.
rehearsal.
Now, you wrote Rotten Evidence in Arabic, and I read it in English and enjoyed it thoroughly. It means the translation was brilliant. What were the challenges? What about the idiom? Did it travel?
Yeah, so we made, I think both of us, me and Catherine Holtz, the translator, and Daniel Gambini as editor, we did a very interesting job in this book. So before moving here to United States, I really didn't care that much about translation. Like, I trust the translator, they love the book, and it's their job. So the deal, what happens that Catherine made the translation, and I told Daniel Gambini, the editor, when you receive the translation, deal with it as it's an English written book, and come back with comments and suggestion to me. So when Daniel's come with me, we totally changed the book. Like, first, there is more than 3 or 4,000 words in the English translation that didn't exist in the Arabic. They were written, I wrote them in English for the English readers. We cut some parts that exist in the Arabic, but we found like it will not work in perfect way in English. We even sometimes changed the style, the narration style. Like in Arabic, for example, there is a tradition, there is a very uh, literary trick that in the same paragraph that you could jump from the first narration to the second narration or the third narration. But when you do this in English, it doesn't make any sense and it loses its beauty. Yeah. So we changed that, for example. Even the structure of the book, like the whole book is written in fragments, and how this fragment organized in the English version is different from the Arabic version.
That's most interesting. Talk to me about the idiom.
There is also some funny details because Catherine Holtz, my translator, she's British, and Daniel Gambini is American.
Okay.
So, for example, I remember a funny thing that there is a nickname for prison guards in Egypt. And when Catherine tried to translate it, she used the word screws. And Daniel was like, what is that? And she was like, oh, it's a British nickname for prison warden and prison guards.
Yes, that's right.
I was like, it's my first time to see this word. This doesn't make any sense here.
Yes.
Because here, the nicknames that they will have for them will be something like they will call them CO2, correction officer. But also, there was this always contradiction between the British English and the American English.
It's interesting that that's the problem you had with idiom, British and American. So, what do you do now?
What I'm now a writer in exile. I live in the beautiful, sunny, hot Las Vegas. After I arrived here and I found myself an exiled writer, I found usually there is two ways to continue here. To continue living here, but writing in Arabic and writing about Egypt. Like as an exile writer, you live in a country that you don't know anything about, but your mind and your heart in another country. And I was like, no, I can't do this. And the other that I found also, some exile writer will come here and they are ready to give the American Institute and American audience what they want, what they are looking for. And playing the identity hat. It's like, oh, today I'm Arabic writer, today I'm Muslim writer, today I'm brown writer, and so on. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I was lucky because I ended in Las Vegas. I think if I ended in East Coast in New York, things would be different.
I agree.
But I ended in Las Vegas and in West and in the desert. And for me, it was a very bizarre and weird and strange place. Like, I go to the desert, what they call it here, the desert, and I was like, this is not desert. Your idea about geography and natural is wrong. Because it's just like will be a mountain full of greens, but it's rocky mountain. There is no sand. I
No
like,
sand.
but then, yeah, but this will lead you to question everything, and curiosity is moving you, and to find an answer. You don't find an answer for this question, but you found the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And after 5 years, I feel the West spirit is getting under my skin. So my work is becoming more and more attached to Vegas nowadays, and attached to the desert spirit.
Do you see the 2 years you spent in prison as the low point of your life?
As the low point of my life, no, no. It was hard. It was hard and extreme, and painful, of course. And I don't wish it for anyone, the Egyptian prison or any other prison. But no, I don't think it's a low point of my life.
So when you were in prison,
Mm-hmm.
what were your thoughts that this will end one day and you'll come out, it's going to be better? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, we in a prison, we always say to each other, we are getting out. There is a day no one will continue live here. One day you will get out. And we will always tell each other, when we get out, we have to take a revenge. And revenge is not by like killing someone or hunting down someone. The revenge is to live every day as, like, we will say, well, every day in prison we have to take a revenge of every day by enjoying 10 days. And this is something that I'm trying to do always.
It's true. There is always the promise of tomorrow.
Yep.
But speaking of which, I'd like to end on a more facetious note and quote to you my favorite Arabic proverb. Bukra fil mishmish.
بالضبط. Yes, you are right.
Ahmed Naji, thank you so much for being my guest today on The Literary City.
Thank you so much. This has been like one of the funnest and enjoyable interviews that I ever had. Really, really, I love it. And I'm looking forward to listen it and to listen to more of your amazing episodes.
You have been listening to Ahmed Naji, Egyptian writer and author of a most fantastic book, Rotten Evidence. I will be back next week with the fascinating Australian historian John Zabriskie and his book, The Shortest History of India. This is the Literary City podcast with me, Ramjee Chandran, on the always fun, always entertaining IndigoMusic.com. Stay tuned.